going to go over to the Pinot. I've tasted this Pinot a few times before, quite recently as well. It tastes a lot like old world Pinots, but in a suit of the new world, if you want to call it like that, like a burgundy in a grunge shirt. You know,
pretty much. Yeah, it's.
How do can you comment that?
I do, because this vintage, particularly because it's the first, you're going to find the clusters will not be 100% consistent and even. So you're going to have a little bit more, a little bit more of the DIY thing, do it yourself, because the first vintage is not going to be perfect. Although it was a great vintage in the state for growing grapes. It's just when you're taking your first harvest, you're not going to have as many leaves on the plant. You're going to have a little bit more exposure. It's not going to be as perfect as you want. But then again, the first records of many bands and are the ones that was the inspiration of everything they've had up until that moment. And that moment of gets, you can hear, like you're listening to, like listening to the first Ramones record. As soon as you drop that needle on there, it's just so loud and it's got everything that they had inside that they want to get out. And this wine has that aspect to it that, subsequently when you try the 2019, the 19 is like the second album where that you like, this band is amazing. Not like they just could make just one good record. The second album is always the most difficult. Yeah, and the idea here is like, this is the raw and rugged, first record. And I can tell you, because I had a glass of the 2019 yesterday. It is amazing. I mean, it reminds me of a bottle of Burgundy that would cost $65 to $75 a bottle. And this first vintage here, this has some of that raw power, if you will. Makes me think of Iggy Pop and the Stooges, like raw power.
Yeah, it has a raw power and also an instant likability that you really get into it, and a lot of energy, which I really like in this. And it has such a length; it lingers on for eternity, which would be a good title for an album as well.
The thing is, if you're thinking New World Pinot Noir, California, Oregon, red fruit, raspberry, spice, fruit bomb, and that's what you like, you're not going to like this wine. If you're thinking Burgundy, restrained, old world, texture, crispness, freshness, I mean, wow.
Yeah, it has a bit of power and punch to it as well, I think.
It reminds me more like Corton. Corton can have that punch. It has that, but with a little bit more body.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, obviously it's not Burgundy. I mean, it's from Washington, but there's no Washingtonian, profile for this. I mean, I planted, produced, and continue to plant the largest planting of Pinot Noir in the history of Washington State. So literally, I'm the first to do it on any sizable level. And considering that we're at the same latitude as Pommard, it makes perfect sense. And we have the same soils as Vos. In Vos Romanée, which is all limestone. We're at 50, it's almost 60% limestone. All their first crew is on the Hup Hill, and it's the same thing. So it has those familiar notes that you've before, But
speaking about another subject that we have in common about art, since this one is one of your newest additions in your range, it has a slightly different look to it and the design as well. It's Ricky Korf behind this one as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's been such a big part of your wine journey. Can you tell a few words about that? Would be nice.
I love Rikke Korf. She's my best friend. I've known her from Denmark because I used to live in Copenhagen starting back in 1989, and I've known her since I think 1992. And she was introduced me to Sune Wagner, the singer of the band The Ravenettes. Earlier, he had a band called Cyclogenesis. So we've been friends for so long. She has incredibly good taste, very particular. She's a clothing designer. And because of our friendship and relationship, we're able to communicate really well. The inspiration for this was to go away from the black and white and go full color, but based on more like mid-century and earlier time, early 1900s American art. And so we wanted to look like an art piece because I don't consider myself an artist, but I do something that's considered artistic. And so I wanted to express that aspect of it. And when you venture off to be basically the pioneer for doing Pinot Noir in Washington State, and you make a commitment, I think that making a commitment to the label and the communication and saying that we're growing this and this is something completely new, expresses just that. And the funny thing is, so this is the first wine. And the thing is, crazy enough, for the folks that have some of this, or if there's still some left in Sweden, because we're sold out now here at the winery, this is a one-off. The first vintage is only going to have this label. I've changed the label.
All right.
And I will show it to you. This is one of this.
Did you guys hear that?
So what's cool about it, so if folks have this wine and don't have this wine, you should get some of this wine, and it's going to be amazing 5 years from now. But this is the next generation of the golden wine.
Oh, the sun or the moon has gone.
Yeah, well, what I did was I took the sunshine and expanded across the entire horizon. Nice. And I made Golden West bigger. But the thing is, what's really kind of cool, which is the same thing that I did with Pop-Up, the first vintage, I gave it its own label, one-off, and the second vintage has what's going to be the label going forward. So it's also a chance for me to express my artistic intent, and also not just have to say this is it for all time, but I can evolve.
That sounds great.
Along with the wine, because the evolution of the wine from the first vintage to the second vintage is quite astounding. But this will only be this first one will only be first time once forever. And so the next generation will only be the beginning of that. You have only, so it's like the piece you gave me, numbered pieces. I mean, there's the first one and there's ghost of that. But this is a first. There's no ghost here. And the second vintage, that's also a first, it's no ghost. So
that's really interesting. Yeah, that's cool.